Doodlebud here. We're going to start a test. If you haven't seen the video, I'll give you a quick summary. This pen didn't seal so well. This is the Wingsung 699. This is the Pilot 823. Copy of a very nice, it's reasonably priced, but it's an expensive pen. Anywho, this thing didn't seal very well. I identified the problem. I did a solution for it, a how-to video. I tested it. It seems like this seals just as good, if not potentially even a little bit better than the Pilot 823. But we got to do a long-term test, so we're going to start the 3-month test now. I'll do a writing sample, but there's something I just discovered while I was getting the pens ready. There is an extra detail I noticed on the 823. It's a very fine detail, but it matters. This is the ink. I inked both of the pens up with to do the test. Got to have the same ink in there to do the test. And as I was getting the pens ready, now let's see if we can get the lighting to be our friend here. This is the barrel of the Wingsung 699. Nothing wrong with it. But do you see the ink, how it's on the side of the barrel? It's all like splotchy. It kind of hangs on to it. Doesn't have a nice, smooth, even coating. So maybe you slosh the ink around. You can tell how much ink is in there. That will not impact the performance of the pen whatsoever. But aesthetically, if you can see that, it doesn't look as nice. Let me show you the Pilot. They obviously do it, whether it's the polish or there's a special coating, whatever they do. Same ink in the pen, but you splosh it around. You do this. It's just so much more elegant. The fluid moves all together. And there's, of course, some that gets left behind, but it coats it evenly. Even if I shake it up, we're going to get bubbles and all this stuff, but watch them all go away. And it now just evenly coats the pen. You give it a second, you do this, and it's all nicely coated. So when you see the ink, you don't see little splotches and stuff. You see the continuous ink level. It's not dispersed all around the pen. It's just, it moves so much nicer as a fluid in the Pilot 823. Never noticed that until now. That is a tiny little detail, but again, it's the little extra effort that went into ensuring that just looks nicer in the pen. Anyways, let's start the test. I will do a writing sample test, but this is going to be a more accurate one. I'm going to do a bunch of dots. I'm going to do a 1-2 count. So I'll go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and I'll do, 20 dots on each one, something like that. And what I'll do afterwards, we're going to put the pens away. So we'll have that sample for each nib, put the pens away for 3 months, come back 3 months later, perform the exact same test. And then we'll be able to compare the size of the dots at the start to after 3 months to see if the ink flow is the same. That is probably the best way, that at least I can think of, simple DIY at home, anyone can do, way to measure it. Without further ado, here is the exciting ink test. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. As you can see, the Pilot dots are a little bit bigger. It's a larger nib point. This one is smaller. It's extra fine. So now we can really measure it regardless of nib point size. All that matters is how well does the nib flow afterwards versus previously. And so they're essentially going to compare against themselves. So let's do a quick writing test. So this is where I'm going to store the pens. My custom little made cigar box I did here. If you want to know how to make these, I did a video on these as well. There we go. Close the lid. We'll show proof. I said October 6th. It's almost the 6th, almost midnight here. So we will see everyone in about 3 months' time. And we're back for the nail-biting conclusion of our test. It is the new year. Happy New Year, everybody. It is January 3rd, 2025. Almost 3 months. Very, very close. I figure this is close enough. I got some time. I had to rewatch the video, so I knew what I was doing again. Found the book, so we got the writing samples. And here are the pens. They have not been used. They've stayed in this case. Here is the exact same tissue. Here we go. There it is here that I did the little dot test. So I'm going to do the same dot test again and we will compare. I will write on here and we will compare. They haven't left this case. As you can see, there's some different pens in here. I had to sort some pens around, but they have not been used, uncapped, or anything since then. They have remained in the case. So let's just see, how are these pens? Have the nibs dried up, or are the seals acting really well? I think they're both going to do fantastic. Let's find out. First up will be the Pilot. I had to watch the video there again so I could get the tempo right. I was just doing a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So I'm going to do that again right now, and we'll see if the dot size is the same. It has not dried out. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so you can see right away we have some dry out. The ink is much darker. That's because some water has evaporated. Yeah, so it has dried out a good chunk. What I'll probably do in a moment is just open up the valve just to compare. I am curious to see if this one is better. We'll do the writing sample in a second. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Ooh, we have a clear winner. I didn't think it would be this obvious. I thought it'd be a nothing burger. This hasn't even fully dried yet. It's still wet, so it will wick out some more through the capillary action here in the tissue paper. But yeah, this is why I like this dot test, to check nib wetness much better than writing, because it is very obvious. It tells you right away. So I declare a winner right there. The improved seal, it wasn't that good from the factory. This thing dried out fairly quick. But if you missed the video, I'll put a link down in the description. You can check it out on, at least on this particular pen, a way to make it seal better. Other pens seal differently, so that doesn't apply to all pens. Let's do the writing sample. Okay, I do have to open the valve. I need to pause and go back to check the video if I had the valve open or not, because this could be totally unfair. That is correct. The valve was closed. So what this means is the ink inside of the lower part here essentially evaporated. You can even see a big difference in the color. Let's try out the Wingsung 699 really quick. I will open the valves here in just a minute, but let's see how this one did. Yeah, okay, it didn't fully dry out. I wouldn't say it's super wet, but it writes absolutely no problem. I'll crack the valves open just to sort of see how quickly it recovers. But before I do that, let's go back to the tissue. You can see it's dried a little bit more. Looks like it needs to dry out just a touch more potentially. Hasn't maybe 100% wicked, but pretty darn close. The color is a little bit darker, which means there was a little bit of evaporation. But yeah, overall, it is a pretty clear winner. That the little modification I did to this Wingsung, it worked pretty darn good if I say so myself. Let's crack the valve here and let the ink flow down into the lower chamber and see how the Pilot A23 does now. Prime it here to get it going. We'll watch the color change happen. Yeah, the ink's flowing wonderfully now. So I mean, that is, you just open the valve up and it's going to start writing again, which is not a big deal. But it's a fun test nonetheless. I'll do the ink dot test again, this time with the valve open. I'll do the 823 on top since we're running out of room here a little bit. We can see with both pens they recovered just perfectly once the valve is open, which is as intended, but it was pretty obvious to see that there was some dry out in the 823. It ran out of ink pretty darn quick. You can see just how much darker that color was because of the evaporation. But the 699 here, it has a great seal. Now, it sort of showed, I mean, you just open the valve, it's going to get back to working normally. So why is cap seal important? Well, if this didn't have this shutoff valve system, for example, if this was a different filling system, cartridge converter, something like that, it really ends up drying up the pen, and it makes it quite a pain in the butt to have to get it going. Sometimes you have to dip it in water, you have to reflush the pen out. Fortunately, with this type of system, you can isolate the main ink reservoir and just the bottom dries out. You crack it open, more ink starts flowing in, and you're good to go. But on other pens, a poorly sealing cap can make the pen very frustrating to use, as it just dries up really quick. Or just long term, if you even just leave it for a month or something, it dries up and it's not as friendly to use. So I do appreciate a well sealing pen with a good sealing cap. And this is a way I've determined to fix the poor seal on this Wingsung 699. So good now it performs better than the Pilot 823 that it's intending to copy. So anyways, I just wanted to do the test. This was more for me than for you. If you found this test interesting and somewhat useful and feel like subscribing, you can hit that. There's a join button. There's a thumbs up. There's the comment section. All that kind of stuff. Catch you next time.